Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
It's time for the Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes, kids. Buckle up and saddle up and get ready for this rip-roaring ride through all of the NFL's matchups this week so that you, yes you, not us, you can be a fantasy football champion one day at the end of this season. But if you are unaware of this show, unfamiliar with the show, kids, it's myself, Keith Gree from 87sportsfans.com. And joining me on this magic mystery ride is the Fantasy Greek himself, Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com. Jim, welcome back to the program.
Keith, good to connect on our usual Wednesday night, man. For some reason, I'm totally excited, totally jacked for tonight, for this week. I feel large and in charge and just, feeling the man flowing through me, just getting all, ready to share my fantasy football wisdom for all our listeners.
So that makes me think that there's weeks where you're not excited.
No, I'm generally excited. Just, like before we got on air, today was one of those days I was highly productive, very productive. All my stuff is in order, and, I feel I'm feeling zen. I do a recording for one show before we do this show, and it felt like, I had it going. I just hope it's the same now for the next hour. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, there you have it, folks.
Yeah.
If you are new to the format, this is how it works here, kids. We're going to go through all of the NFL matchups and give you all the information you need to set your lineup for the coming week. If you have any lineup-specific questions that you want to pick Jim's brain about, rather, the phone number is 585-633-7487. That's 585-633-7487. Or you can hit on the Twitter and hashtag AskTFG. So do that, and we will get your personalized experience here on the show.
We're all into personalization, Keith.
Absolutely.
Which reminds me, for all our listeners out there, come to thefantasygreek.com and check out our Skybox. Keith, you have magic words for it, but I will just say that this week we have rolled out our fantasy points allowed for the fantasy football playoffs, weeks 14 to 16 and 15 to 17. I was checking out. I've already made some trades based on it. It is just some phenomenal stuff. You need to see if you're in the running. If you've got 4 or more wins, you need to get with the Greek, get into the Skybox, and see how your team stands up for the fantasy playoffs, because I'm telling you, it made me make some moves that, I think are going to make a difference.
And there you have it, kids. The Skybox.
Skybox.
Up to the minute insider information. You can feel like Adam Schefter and Chris Mortensen all rolled into one, but with you and your sexist style. So here we go. The Cleveland Browns travel to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns naming Johnny Manziel the starter today, not to be lost in what we're going to talk about. But the Bengals with a big 16-10 win over the Steelers on the road in Pittsburgh, in a game where Andy Dalton looked like bad Andy was going to show up again, turned out to not be the case. The Bengals are just a much better team than the Browns here, kids. This is a division game in Cincinnati. The Browns may have a little bit more flash and dash to them with Manziel at quarterback, but there's no reason the Bengals don't win this game. I'm picking Cincinnati.
Keith, I got to go with you too. This is shaping up to look like a dominating win by the Bengals. The Browns are just giving up. I mean, they're almost giving up twice as many TDs as the Bengals are. And it doesn't help with Johnny Manziel getting the start. Not that he'll necessarily be bad, but at least from Josh McCown when he's healthy, you can come to expect him to throw 300 yards and 2 to 3 TDs in every outing, and that's what it will take to stay competitive with this team, because the Browns' defense is, for the most part, struggling. From a fantasy football perspective, view Andy Dalton as a must start this week. He's a top 6 or 7 fantasy football player. You can check out our player rankings at thefantasygreek.com to confirm. You can view Jeremy Hill as a start against one of the worst, if not the worst, actually the worst rush defense in the league, giving up about 147 yards rushing per game, 1 TD per game. You can view him as a start, as the Bengals have gone out of their way to give him the touches these past 2 weeks, roughly 16 per game. Gio Bernard has been solid. He might, maybe he's more of an RB3 this week, but, he should get some work if the Bengals get to running a lot. A.J. Green is a must-start, and certainly the Bengals defense should be active in all leagues against Johnny Manziel. Not to say that he'll have a bad game, but, he's a wild card. For the Browns, like Gary Barnidge, he has been just solid. He's a solid 70, 80-yard receiver, 1 TD per week. There's no reason why he can't be the same. Travis Benjamin has struggled lately. I know one of his big breakout games was when Johnny Manziel was under center. So there's no reason not to believe that Manziel won't take a few shots, so you can start him if you got him as a wide receiver 3. In terms of the running game, I think it's a little harder to gauge for the Browns because the Bengals they're middle of the road, 110 yards rushing per game, but just 3 rushing TDs per game. Same thing, middle of the road in fantasy points allowed. So, if you got to pick, you're going with Duke Johnson, benching Isaiah Crowell, but both, I think, have certain ceilings in this offense. At the end of the day, if you're a Bengals fan, you should feel really good about your team. If you're a Browns fan, hold out and, I still think this is a team that can make some noise from now until Week 17, Keith. And, we'll see.
In a battle of teams that were poised to excite but have underwhelmed so far, the Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills, both teams 3-4. The Dolphins on a bit of an uptick until last week's game against the Patriots, where they were ultimately shredded by Tom Brady to the tune of 26 of 38 for 356 yards and 4 touchdowns. The Bills, on the other hand, suffered through an E.J. Manuel performance that was largely forgettable against the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday, October 25th. And losing to the Jaguars, by the way, 34-31, with giving up a 27-point second quarter. It was turnover-riddled, I tell you. This week, Tyrod Taylor is listed as he's pretty. I'm sure he's a personable guy, but he's also listed as probable with a knee injury and is likely to play. Carlos Williams, the running back, is most likely to be the starter come Sunday, with LaShawn McCoy still kind of up in the air. I'm not seeing him on the injury report, but I did not hear much about him practicing in the local media. But here's the thing, kids. The Bills are not the Patriots. And this is one of those heated rivalry games. The first game, the Bills went into Miami and just absolutely spanked them. And this is a game where you like to think that the home team is at a decided advantage. But, when both teams were good, the Packers-Bears rivalry sometimes was like this. The road team would end up getting the win in the matchup, and even when people didn't think they could. It's all going to come down to Ryan Tannehill, really. I'm going to tell you that. Because the Bills' running defense is as stingy as they come in the league. And though Lamar Miller had enjoyed a bit of a renaissance briefly in the Dan Campbell regime, 9 rushes for 15 yards against the Patriots isn't going to do it. And the Patriots were a bad running defense. They were. But they got coached up, if you want to call it that, and played out of their minds. Rex Ryan is that kind of defensive coach. I think this is going to be like a 9-6 game. And as tempted as I am my gut is telling me to take the Dolphins in this game, I'm actually going to take the Bills.
I have to agree with you, Keith. The first thing in their favor is the fact that they're coming out of their bye week. And the second thing is that they're playing at home. I mean, I looked at this game, and it's always tough to gauge the second game between two teams because you kind of want to say, well, they know each other a little bit better after the first game, and therefore, might be lower scoring. It might be more of a battle. And while it still will be a battle, I think there's going to be plenty of offense to go around, if only because of the numbers. And certainly the last time these two teams played, the Bills shellacked the Dolphins 41-14. The only person on the Dolphins that was really worth the fantasy start was Ryan Tannehill, who threw for almost 300 yards and a couple of TDs but had 3 interceptions. Everybody else struggled a little bit. Rashard Matthews actually was good, 113 yards, 2 TDs. So for me, like you, I'm going to stick with the Bills at home. I think with Tyrod Taylor coming back, that should give this offense some juice because he can run the ball. And for him to have a repeat performance of that last game, but maybe two passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, wouldn't be a surprise. You can go ahead and view LaShawn McCoy as sort of an RB2 because Carlos Williams is coming back this week, and it's hard to gauge how much work he's going to get. I'm going to guess that he's going to get eased in. So view LaShawn McCoy as an RB2, Carlos Williams as an RB3. Start your for the Bills, it looks like Sammy Watkins could be back. If he's back, he's a must start. Robert Woods is sort of a sleeper. Charles Clay is a for sure start. He was good for 82 yards and a TD in the last game. For the Dolphins, after Ryan Tannehill, Lamar Miller makes for a soft RB2. I think you still got to start Jarvis Landry. He is the most targeted player on this team, and in fact, in the first game, he had 8 targets. He just couldn't produce as much as Rashard Matthews. Look at Rashard Matthews as a wide receiver 3. Jordan Cameron has just been way too soft for me. I mean, he's just not putting up the kinds of numbers that make him a required TE1 play, and there's nothing about this game that says so you can sit him if you got him. The Bills' defense and the Dolphins' defense, they're more sort of, they're outside the top 12. It's just, I don't think it's the greatest week to start them. And while I'm a huge Dolphins fan, I'm glad that they moved on from their old situation to their new situation. The Bills coming out of this bye, I think there's just too many good reasons to see this Bills team just come back and go out there and just play hard-nosed football. Bills win.
And to update my previous comment, LaShawn McCoy is not on the Bills injury report at all this week so far. So he should.
Thank God for that.
He should be the starter.
Glad I gave you all the time to think about that.
Well, it's one of those things.
Research.
Because I listen to the local media. I am a connoisseur of local media, even though I'm not a personally big fan of any of the teams around here. But I could have sworn that I heard somebody say that he wasn't practicing, but there's nothing on the internets, so it must be just my ears.
Must be.
So moving on, the suddenly 6-1 Green Bay Packers go to the Carolina Panthers in a game that I picked wrong last week. The Broncos stifle the Packers. I just didn't believe in the Broncos offense. I know they were coming off their bye and everything like that, but apparently it healed what was ailing them because C.J. Anderson for the Broncos was able to run all over the Packers defense. Yes, 5 days after I released him. I just had to get that off my chest. The Carolina Panthers, on the other hand, held serve against a 17-point fourth quarter barrage and even into overtime against the Indianapolis Colts and managed to remain undefeated. So what does this all mean here in the grand scheme of things? Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers, but this Panthers defense cannot be taken for granted. And they are also the best rushing team in the NFL for a variety of reasons. Jonathan Stewart is having a very good year, and also Cam Newton is a dual threat. They don't ask a whole lot of much of him as far as passing attempts. But you know what? They're 29th in the league in passing yards per game. The Packers with Aaron Rodgers are 27th. So this game is an interesting matchup in a variety of reasons. The Packers, I think, were able to hide some of their weaknesses. One of them being a rush defense that was playing better than they actually are. In Carolina, in this, I gotta tell you, I'm taking the Panthers in this. I'm a believer in the Ron Rivera bandwagon. Here I am. I'm dressed in my blue and silver, taking the Panthers to beat the Packers.
And I don't see anything wrong with that call. I actually like the Green Bay Packers in this game for a couple of reasons. I think the first one is the shellacking they took last week. I mean, how embarrassing. they look like a Pop Warner TV, or Pop Warner team on national TV last week. And you wouldn't even want it to be a Packers fan after what you saw. It was so bad. But the thing that, when you compare the Packers game against the Broncos to the Colts game against the Panthers, the Colts, despite all their shortcomings, were able to come back, were able to make some moves with their personnel, and I think that the Packers will be able, with those same moves, to actually execute. They'll be prepared to execute, and I think their defense is going to come out a lot stronger. I'm calling this a close game. My notes, I'm calling it a 27 to 23 point game. So in terms of, it's a close game, so it's a tough game to call. It could go the other way, but I like the Packers. I think you have to stick with Aaron Rodgers. He'll play so much better than Andrew Luck did last week, and he'll play so much better than he played against the Broncos. So you go ahead and you start him. You start Randall Cobb. Even against that stout Panther secondary can be beaten, and I think these are the guys that can do it. Will they do it on every single drive? No, but they'll do enough to put the kinds of points on that I described. At 27 to 3, put those kinds of points on. James Jones, I think, is a little bit of a shakier play. He's going to be good for you if he can score, and that's the bigger question. Devontae Adams, we're still not seeing much from him. Richard Rodgers, you might as well just avoid him. In terms of the Panthers, I don't like Cam Newton this week. I think this is a poor matchup for him. The Packers secondary is absolutely stout compared to the Colts secondary, and I think Clay Matthews, that entire defensive line, all those linebackers are going to come out for blood against Cam Newton, and they're going to make some noise. Jonathan Stewart is still a solid play because the Packers are still giving up 124 rush yards per game and just about one TD per game. So he's solid. Greg Olsen is solid. Ted Ginn, I would probably avoid him. The drops last week, that was one thing, but this week I don't think he'll get those kinds of chances against Morgan Burnett, Clinton Dix, all those guys. And in terms of the defenses, they're both low defenses this week. They're startable, but if you can find a Falcons defense, a Vikings defense, I would start them ahead of them. And again, Keith, I like the Packers to actually sort of bounce back this week. Everything shapes up right in terms of the matchup via personnel and scheme. Packers win.
The St. Louis Rams travel to the Minnesota Vikings. The Rams coming off a big win over the San Francisco 49ers 27-6, which saw the ensuing benching of Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco and the trade of Vernon Davis. And basically the San Francisco says, we give up. It's not going to happen this year. The Bears are hosted the Vikings last week, and Minnesota went and put up 13 fourth-quarter points to pull away 23-20 against them. Teddy Bridgewater, only 187 yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs, the rookie phenom, 6 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. Adrian Peterson broke the century mark, like he always seems to do against Chicago. Just one of those things. It happens. Death, taxes, and Adrian Peterson making the Bears feel like they can't play defense. But this week is a different story, and that is that the St. Louis Rams are in a top 10 rushing defense. And that's going to put an awful lot of pressure on Teddy Bridgewater. And the Rams are also 9th in passing yards allowed per game. They have a top 4 scoring defense. The Vikings are second as well. The Vikings defense is one of those teams that flew completely under the radar. Nobody talks about them, but they are playing pretty good ball. This is the even matchup across the board. Usually in these, I like to take the the home team rather, but I'm going with my gut. This is one of those things where my gut is telling me to ignore my brain, and I'm going to take the Rams to go into Minnesota and come away with a win.
After hearing that, I'm genuinely questioning where your brain is located, Keith. Aha. But I will agree with your gut. I think that's where your brain is located. I like the Rams. They're playing some phenomenal football, especially on defense. They have now got Todd Gurley in tow, and he's going to be able to carry this offense no matter who the opponent. So I'm going to pick them on the road in what should be a low-scoring defensive battle. I have my notes here, maybe 20-16, and that might even be high. But these are two tough teams, both of which are I'm sorry, the Rams are number one in terms of pass TDs allowed. So that makes a guy like Stephon Diggs a difficult play this week. I mean, you can view him as a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I think he can get you one touchdown because somebody's got to score here for the Vikings. And I'm not so sure it's going to be Adrian Peterson against a rush defense that's just given up 98 yards per game and just 3 TDs on the season. I think they'll be able to shut him down, so Diggs might be a decent play. And I like the Vikings defense because the Rams, despite this great defense, their offense, and even Todd Gurley, I mean, they're still giving up top 5 fantasy points to opposing defenses, so you got to like the Vikings as a play if you need the help. And then for the Rams, Todd Gurley, I mean, he should be able to get you a couple of TDs this week, certainly 100 to 150 all-purpose yards. Rams defense, weekly must start. If you see anybody dump them on your waiver wire, you go out and you go get them. Rams win.
Just to kind of put the Rams defense in perspective here, Pro Football Focus, obviously cumulative ratings by defense, total defense. The Broncos are overall with a 96.3. The Rams are number 2 at 92.2. The Vikings are 6th on that list. This is going to be a great game if you like defensive struggles.
Yeah, if you like defense, you should see a lot of that. I mean, this is the kind of team that they're just good. They're getting the fumbles, they're getting the interception, sacks. I mean, huge.
All right, the Washington Redskins travel to the New England Patriots. Redskins sitting at 3-4. The Patriots undefeated and are looking like the T1000 version of an NFL team. They can do nothing wrong, and even the stuff that they didn't do well, it seems like they can pull it out of their head and all of a sudden look like world beaters, taking into account the way they shut down the Dolphins' running game last week, holding Lamar Miller to 15 yards and a touchdown. Brady went for 356 and 4 touchdowns. Gronkowski went for 113 yards and a touchdown. And we had a LeGarrette Blount sighting, 72 yards on 17 rushes for Blount. For the Redskins, a 1-point win against the Buccaneers. Kirk Cousins went 317 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a come-from-behind win, and gave us that wonderful, wonderful soundbite. You like that? Jordan Reed, 11 catches for 72 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Matt Jones, the leading rusher, 29 yards. Whoop-dee-doo. So here it is, kids. Real simple. Here's the analysis that you tune in for to listen every week and how I break down these games. The Patriots are going to destroy the Redskins. It's just that simple. It's in New England. They're favored by 14. They're giving Washington 2 touchdowns. Yes, I know that's a gambling thing. It doesn't have anything to do with on the field. But you know what? If bettors are willing to give a team 2 touchdowns in the NFL, there's no reason to break this game down anymore. Patriots win easily.
Yeah, this should shape up to be somewhat similar to that Dolphins game. The Redskins, you have to like the Redskins' defense. Offensively, they don't have as many weapons as the Dolphins do. It's hard for me to see the Redskins doing much better than the Dolphins, who only put up 7 points against that Patriots team. I mean, I think the Patriots will be able to put a defensive game plan together to stymie the Redskins' rushing attack and just go right at them. And I think the Patriots will probably pound them by going on the ground, by going after one of their strengths and trying to take it away, which is the Redskins' rush defense. So all that having been said, the Patriots' defense isn't the greatest on earth. And Kirk Cousins has technically a favorable matchup on paper. I would avoid him, though. Pierre Garçon is the best fantasy play for the Redskins and Jordan Reed because the Patriots give up about 250 yards passing, 11 TDs on the season, with a majority of that going to the wide receiver. And then Alfred Morris, Matt Jones, teams want to have, complementary backs, and they're both good, and it's just not working with these two. I mean, something is not right or ripe. They, one has a good game, the other has a bad game, or the other week, neither had a good game. So I kind of look at this and say, I'd avoid these players if you have them. I mean, the only way you should be playing is if you're in a deep league like you and I are, Keith, in a 16-team league. Otherwise, avoid them. For the Patriots, pretty much you got to start them all. Deion Lewis did not have a great game against the Dolphins, 5 carries, 39 yards. I think he might have caught a reception somewhere in there. So he ended up being a poor play where LeGarrette Blount actually ended up being a good play, but it's hard to bench either of them. I might put Lewis ahead of Blount, but they're both still on the RB2 radar, and if you got him, you probably got to play him. Start Tom Brady as always, Julian Edelman as always, Rob Gronkowski as always. Brandon LaFell is the wide receiver 3 amongst the rest of the receivers to play in fantasy, but you don't have to. I mean, if he blows it up, trust me, it will be one of these. It'll be inconsistent. It won't be coming unless they have a really, really favorable matchup in the passing game, which I can't say that they have here. And then the Patriots defense, you start them because at best, I think the Redskins have 2 touchdowns in them and a field goal. So, this just does not bode well for that Redskins team. Patriots continue to dominate at home.
All right, Tennessee Titans at the New Orleans Saints. Tennessee Titans with a brand new head coach. Ken Wisenhunt shown the door. Mike Mularkey takes.
How many claps do you think there were in Titans-ville?
It's like, what's fair? Like, what time frame is fair to give a guy with a rookie quarterback? And even though Marcus Mariota has been injured, and when he has been played, he's played pretty well. There's got to be something behind the scenes that no one's telling us.
Absolutely, Keith. I agree.
There's got to be some kind of torquing going on behind the scenes where he just irritated people.
Did you say twerking?
Torquing.
Torquing.
I haven't twerked in at least 4 days.
Let me hand you a towel.
The Saints at 4-4. These two teams actually haven't played since 2011, and the two teams were very different, so it's not even worth mentioning. Last week, the Giants and the Saints were in a barn burner of a game, 52-49. Drew Brees broke the 5-century mark, 505 yards, 7 touchdowns. Madden stats: Ben Watson, 147 yards and a touchdown. Mark Ingram ran for 80 yards. The story with the Saints, by the way, the Titans lost to the Texans 20-6. Zach Mettenberger, 171 yards, no touchdowns. And Antonio Andrews led the way, rushing 64 yards. Keep an eye on the Titans running game as David Cobb is set to come off of injured reserve one of these days. If you stashed him in a dynasty league and you're waiting to see what happens, because that running game no one has taken control of that running game from a running back standpoint. So anything can possible. If Cobb is healthy and able to play, I would imagine he'd get some kind of snaps as soon as they activate him from injured reserve. But that being said, it's the first game under a new head coach. I don't see Mularkey having the same kind of impact that Dan Campbell had in Miami, where he just kind of toughened them up over a bye week. It hasn't been that kind of time here. The Saints, while their defense has been deplorable this year, Brees has showed signs of awakening. And yes, I know it's easy to say that when a guy throws for 500 yards, but the 2 games before this, it hasn't exactly been as electric as the glory days, as the Super Bowl years. But they've definitely been better. They're at home. I'm taking the Saints.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Saints, too. I mean, after what they did last week, it's hard to say no to the Saints. I mean, even if they were playing the Broncos, it'd be hard to look at that team and say, oh, let's sit some of these players. I mean, what they did last week really smacked of that old school Saints offense. Well, not old school, but what we're used to seeing, which took them to a Super Bowl. So whatever happened last week, they're going to keep rolling that out. They're going to keep hitting different receivers. They're going to keep passing the ball quickly. They're going to hit you with some running. They're going to smack you in the mouth. Their defense is terrible. Nothing like that has changed. But it still should be enough to beat the Titans. Now, interestingly, Mike Mularkey came out and openly talked about or intimated that they would ground and pound the ball this week. That they want to get a guy like Antonio Andrews the football more. And even though Antonio Andrews hasn't, shaken the fantasy world, the reality is if they're going to give him the football 20 times, they're going to openly try to slow this game down, which sort of puts a little wrinkle into how you view Titans players specifically. Because right now, Marcus Mariota is a great streaming option against a Saints pass defense, which is giving up 280 yards passing, 4th most in the league, in a league-leading 20 pass TDs. So you can still stream them, but it gets me nervous when you hear about Antonio Andrews getting 20 to 25 touches. Now that makes Antonio Andrews a much stronger RB3 play, certainly pushes him towards a low-end RB2. I already thought of Dorial Green-Beckham as an option in deeper leagues because I got to think part of the reason that Ken Whisenhunt got fired is, one, a lack of a running game, which how is that possible after you've spent a couple of high draft picks? And then, two, they have such a talent like Dorial Green-Beckham, and they're not even showcasing him in the offense. And in the limited time that he's had, when he's had an opportunity to play, he's made plays. So they're going to roll those sorts of things out. And you can view those players as playable in all formats. But deeper leagues, especially for Dorial Green-Beckham. For the Saints, you start Drew Brees, Mark Ingram, Willie Snead, Brandon Cooks, Ben Watson. C.J. Spiller's a guy to watch. Certainly this bodes well in terms of his opportunity to work in the passing game, but he could be hit or miss. Marcus Colston had a tremendous game last week, and what was even great was he caught 6 out of 8 targets. When was the last time this guy was targeted 8 times? It might have been targeted earlier in the season that much, but not until last week is it taken off. So we want to see him do that again before we talk about him in fantasy. And while I do like the Saints defense this week because it's a rookie quarterback, they're still top 5 in most fantasy points allowed. So you can view him as a streaming option if you absolutely have to. The Saints should win this, and they're back in the conversation, Keith, as a contender in the NFC South.
Wow. In the NFC South, you think about the Titans with one game are still 2 games out of the first place spot in the AFC South. It's just amazing.
Oh, it's a ridiculous. This is the division that's going to be, maybe the Colts make it and they make it on a losing record.
Yep, it's like the NFC South last year.
Yeah,
with Carolina.
It's unexplainable, despicable, I would say, because nobody thought. Everybody thought the Colts would be walking away and running away with this division, and that's just not happened.
This is an interesting opportunity, I think, for the NFL to kind of adjust its playoff system. That maybe not every division champion deserves to make the playoffs.
I agree.
Because Carolina, I think, actually won a game last year in the playoffs, if I remember correctly. But it's just usually bad football.
Yeah. Well, even though the Seahawks, remember when they did that with Marshawn, and Marshawn Lynch had that great run in the wild card game?
Oh, when he destroyed Saints fans.
Yeah, the Saints, yeah. Wow. That was, Yeah. So, I don't know.
Saints fans don't like it when you bring that up, by the way. The Jaguars, however you say it. Jacksonville Jaguars travel to the New York Jets. 2-5 Jags, 4-3 Jets. Good news, Jets fans. Coach Todd Bowles has indicated that Ryan Fitzpatrick will indeed be starting this week, so you don't have to worry about the possibility of Bryce Petty being your signal caller this week. Both Fitzpatrick and Geno Smith ended up getting hurt last week, so that was all up in the air, but the Jets losing badly to the Raiders 34-20. A game that I thought that they would win. I didn't expect them to win easily, but I thought they would win, just be having a better defense. But tip your cap to Derek Carr and the Raiders. The Jaguars, last time we saw them, they were beating the Buffalo Bills 34-31 on October 25th. And with that big second quarter, like I talked about during when we were talking about the Bills, they were as opportunistic as a defense can be, and yet were hanging on and had to come from behind in a game where they were up 27-3. So even though there's always signs of progress with the Jaguars, there's nothing really to make you jump and shout about them. The Jets, on the other hand, last week was a fluke with Geno playing instead of Fitzpatrick. I truly believe that was the big difference there. Their defense is lights out usually. They're at home. Jacksonville just can't score points, and they give up a ton of points on offense, or on defense rather. I'm going to pick the Jets here and not worry about it.
Yeah, the Jaguars have played impressively. They've generated more offense than I think most of us anticipated. The Jets did struggle last week against that Raiders team with Derek Carr. They threw the football on them, and they did not do well. So you have to think the Jaguars have sat down and looked at that game tape and are going to try and replicate some of the things that the Raiders were successful in doing against the Jets. And they have the personnel to do it. So that having been said, I'm sticking with the Jets too. They have the biggest reason to bounce back and have one of their suffocating wins than is anybody else in front of their home fans. So, the Jets, no-brainer defensive start. The Jaguars still give up fantasy points in the top 10. They should do the same here. I wouldn't even be surprised if it does. They get a defensive kick return. Or, I'm sorry, an interception return for a TD. So you go and start your Jets with confidence. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, Chris Ivory, all starts based on the matchups. You can read more about that at thefantasygreek.com. For the Jaguars, because they could be put in this weird situation, they're going to throw the football. Blake Bortles is he's like a borderline QB1. I mean, you've really got to have some unique circumstances to play him. And if you don't have those, avoid them. Go check out our player rankings. Allen Robinson, Allen Hurns. Hurns, I think, is the better play, but you got to respect them both. They've been doing some amazing things despite the matchups. And tell a rookie or tell young players, oh, you're going up against Darrelle Revis. I mean, they're like, who? I mean, it might mean something to all of us, but it probably doesn't mean as much to them. They're still going to go out and try and make the plays. So I would consider starting both of them as wide receiver 2s, certainly as wide receiver 3s in all leagues. But Keith, like you, I'm going to take the Jets at home, 28-20.
The Oakland Raiders travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers. 4-3 Raiders, Steelers 4-4. Steelers dealt a deafening blow last week with running back Le'Veon Bell, just shredding his MCL. Missed the remainder of the season, obviously, and we wish him all the best. But that being said, they had a pretty capable backup in the wings with DeAngelo Williams. And he actually ended up with 71 yards on 9 carries in relief after Bell went down. Roethlisberger looked a little rusty, 28 of 45 for 262, a TD, and a couple of interceptions. One interception, just absolutely unbelievable athletic effort on the Bengals' part. The Raiders, on the other hand, we just talked about them beating the Jets at home. So this is a game that really is one of the more interesting matchups this weekend. If you look at the season-long statistics, the Raiders don't know how to defend the pass, Rod Woodson aside, or Charles Woodson aside, but they are very stout against the run, and passing offense-wise, top 10. But they struggle with running the ball. Their leading rusher, Latavius Murray, only 534 yards on 115 carries for the season. They're eighth, a top 10 scoring offense, and middle of the road in defense. The Steelers, which, yes, I know Roethlisberger was hurt for a couple of games, are just the opposite, struggling to score this year, but their defense has been far and away better than anything we'd ever hoped they could be this year, 5th in the defensive scoring. At home, this is a pick that I'm going to make that I don't feel very confident about, but I am just going to stick with the home team here, and I'm going to take the Steelers because I don't think the drop-off from DeAngelo Williams from Le'Veon Bell to DeAngelo Williams will be anything to really steer this offense aside. I think Roethlisberger in a second game back will look a little bit smoother. I'm going to take the Steelers at home.
I'm going to take the Steelers too, 27-20. I agree with you, and part of the reason is, look, the Raiders, their pass defense, it's better in the red zone, but they're still giving up over 300 yards per game. I mean, that is just going to help open up the Steelers' offense. It should do everybody some good. So you're starting Big Ben, DeAngelo Williams, Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant, and Heath Miller is an absolute must-start. I'm going to look at our rankings again over the next few days, and I might even move them up some more. You do the math. In teams that actually bother to play their tight end in the offense, and the Steelers have been doing that, and do that with Heath Miller and Ben Roethlisberger in the lineup, they average 6 receptions, 70-some yards, and an automatic score. So Heath Miller is a must-start this week. For the Raiders, Derek Carr, I mean, look, the Steelers have a good defense. They were one of my recommended ads this week off the waiver wire because they're so available in so many leagues, but they've gotten better. They're not the Troy Polamalu Steelers, but they're still a good defensive unit. But, Derek Carr's good enough and showed last week he's good enough that he could put up some TDs. So while I'm predicting a 27-20 score, Derek Carr is the wild card. If he shows up to play big-time football, this game could really turn into a barn burner, and we could see this score break 30 for both teams. So you can consider Derek Carr as a borderline QB1. Certainly Amari Cooper is a must-start. despite the matchup. And Michael Crabtree, I can't even believe how many leagues I've seen him on waiver wires. He is, I don't know if he's top 5, top 10, but he's right up there in terms of one of the most targeted wide receivers. And even if you're kind of him and haw on his production, trust me, he's got enough games and he gets enough action that he's going to come through for you, and I see him coming through this week. If there's a player to consider sitting, it's Latavius Murray, only because the Steelers are only giving up about 97 yards rushing and only 2 rushing TDs on the season, which is not very good. So you can consider him as a bench-type player. But Keith, like you, I like how this game is laying out where it should be going, and I'm going to go with the Steelers at home because they need a big-time win.
Yeah, not to talk about the only Steelers big loss there being Le'Veon Bell, but losing Calvin Beachum is on the offensive line is a big loss too over the course of the year. So I just think Williams will be able to perform. So the Atlanta Falcons travel to the San Francisco 49ers. Big news in San Francisco as it was announced by head coach Jim Tomsula that Colin Kaepernick wouldn't be starting. So who does that leave you with, 49ers fans? Blaine Gabbert, the venerable Blaine Gabbert. Yeah, good luck because the Falcons, while they give up some yards in the passing game, they don't give up much on the ground. So that means all of the pressure is going to be on Gabbert to be able to pass. And even though they're at home, I just don't see that happening. Atlanta wins, and I don't even look at this game.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What game are we talking? Oh, yeah, the Falcons, 49ers. I've got the 49ers scoring a couple of TDs, and I'm not exactly sure where they're going to come from. In fact, in fantasy, you look at the 49ers, and there's not a single player you could really look at and then say, oh, yeah, go play them. We know it's going to be a 3-headed monster rushing the football. And, is it going to be Pierre Thomas? Is it going to be Kendall Gaskins, Sean Drone? I don't know. But I suppose, they're all going to do something because Blaine Gabbert's just not a very good quarterback. If you want the actual numbers, I'm going to do my best to recall them, but if you want the actual numbers, go to thefantasygreek.com and specifically look at our waiver wire report and my recommendation that if the Falcons are on your waiver wire, you should go get them. It is very detailed in terms of the kinds of numbers that Blaine Gabbert has put up in his 27 starts. And let's start off with his average of about 160, 170 yards passing per game. Not very good. His average of about 1 TD per game. His average of about 1 interception per game. His average of about 1 fumble per game. Well, I think 1 fumble per game, but doesn't really matter. And you kind of look at it. And I think 2 to 4 sacks per game. So there's nothing about this that it just So I feel for 49ers fans, for Falcons fans, fire it up. Start Matt Ryan. Devonta Freeman should be the number 1 running back this week. Fire him up. He's just going to just clobber this 49ers rush defense, giving up 123 yards rushing, 9 TDs on the season, and that's rushing TDs. They are the 6th most fantasy points, so that means there's even going to be a bunch of receiving TDs in there for him. Julio Jones must start. I like Jacob Tamme as a low TE1. And, of course, the Falcons defense, a top 5 start, if not the top start. Consider them in your daily fantasy football leagues. Falcons, rise up.
That's like the second or third time you've done that on this show.
What's that?
Rise up.
Hey man, the fans they know.
Okay.
They know.
Yeah, they do, and that's why they've all clicked off of this. The Giants at the Buccaneers. The Giants 4-4. The Buccaneers 3-4. Giants just couldn't keep up with Drew Brees last week, but Eli Manning did his darndest.
Hey, honey, Keith's making me feel small again. Go ahead. Sorry.
There are so many angles for me to go there. I'm just going to take the high road, just for the record. I'm moving on. 350 yards for Eli Manning, 6 touchdowns. Odell Beckham Jr., 3 TDs, 130 yards through the air. He just is one of those dynamic playmakers when he's healthy. He just is. No one can contain him when he's healthy. The Buccaneers, on the other hand, beat the Falcons. Yes, that's right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers went into Atlanta, pushed them to overtime, and won on the road. Jameis Winston only 177 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans, 3 catches, 48 yards. Doug Martin, 23 rushes for 71 yards. Yes, I know the numbers don't add up. How the heck did they beat them? Well, that's a whole other discussion. That being said, the Buccaneers are riding high. Jameis Winston is starting to show some improvement on tape, and if it's not showing up in the box score, if you will. But the Buccaneers are running the ball pretty well. Doug Martin, a little bit of a resurgence this year. Their defense, middle of the road in yards, but they give up a bunch of points. They just do. The New York Giants are a top 5 scoring offense, right? Right? Who top? They're 11th in passing yards per game. They don't run the ball very much, kind of following the New England Patriots recipe, where they don't need to run. Eli Manning is having a pretty darn good year. The passing defense in New York is awful. The rushing defense, nothing to jump and shout about. They're supposedly going to get Jason Pierre-Paul back in heavy doses this weekend, but I don't know how much I believe that personally. I just think Eli is playing too good a ball right now in Tampa Bay. They just don't defend the pass as well as I would like. I'm going to take the Giants on the road here.
Yeah, after what we saw somebody had to lose that game between the Saints and the Giants, and it just happened to be the Giants. Otherwise, they were right there. They could have won that game. And that offense was just Eli Manning against a bad pass defense. You have to start him. You have to start Odell Beckham Jr. You have to start Shane Vereen. We're a team like the Buccaneers. They give up 244 yards per game, which isn't all that bad, but 17 TDs on the season, which is tied for the second most in the league. All those Giants I mentioned, they're must-starts. For the Buccaneers, it's not a bad matchup either because we saw what the Saints could do against a Giants defense, giving up the most pass yards in the league at 315 yards per game, and also tied for second most TDs allowed at 17. Jameis Winston's an option. He's a streaming option in the league where you're, especially because of these bye weeks, we're missing 6 quarterbacks. You're starting Mike Evans. Austin Seferian-Jenkins is due to come back. As long as that happens, he is going to pick up a boatload of targets because last week Jameis Winston had a hard time connecting with Mike Evans, and because of that, he had a hard time connecting with anybody else. Jenkins stands to win. Go at him. Go play him. I also like Doug Martin. The Giants are giving up 112 yards rushing and almost 1 TD every week. The Buccaneers are going out of their way to make sure Doug Martin is a part of this offense, so expect him to have a big day. I got it at 27-20, Keith. It could go higher, but I'm going to stick with the Giants because I believe in that firepower, and especially Odell Beckham Jr. They're going to ring it up, man.
The Denver Broncos at the Indianapolis Colts. The Broncos 7-0, largely because of their defense, although last week it looked like Peyton Manning was back and ready to shut people up. Now he goes into Indianapolis, the team where, I don't want to say unceremoniously, because there was a nice emotional moment when owner Jim Irsay parted ways with Manning, clearing the way for free agency and his move to Denver. But Indianapolis, where Peyton made a name for himself, struggling this year mightily. Chuck Pagano on the hot seat for obvious reasons. They are 20th in points scored, 21st in points allowed. The Broncos defense right now is just a juggernaut that held Aaron Rodgers to 77 yards passing. That's 77, not 177, 77 yards passing. You have to tip your cap to what Wade Phillips is doing in Denver because it is just fantastic. They're first in scoring, first in defensive passing yards allowed, and they are 4th in defensive rushing yards allowed per game. This may be the game that gets Chuck Pagano fired. I'm picking the Broncos.
I think it is the game that gets Chuck Pagano fired. We saw what the Broncos did against a much better offense in the Green Bay Packers. I just cannot see the Colts. Andrew Luck, something is genuinely wrong, whether it's his health, whether it's he's having a hard time connecting with the players, because the offense it was the same. It's Pep Hamilton. They've been running the same damn offense, and they've actually improved it by having more bodies on the field. But the problem is, and it's a problem that's very common is their offensive line's not doing a good job of protecting Andrew Luck. He's hurried, he's rushed. You even saw it in Aaron Rodgers' eyes. You saw it in Andrew Luck's eyes. They had the deer in the headlight look, where they're just waiting to get hit. This is that kind of game where this Broncos team is just going to be up all over him constantly, and I just don't see it getting any better. I'm giving him 17 points because I think he's got enough in him to at least throw one touchdown, maybe two. I think Frank Gore's the one who gets a score, almost, I suppose, a gimme score. I mean, the Broncos are tough against running backs, 89 yards allowed, 5 rushing TDs on the season, but still view Gore as an RB2. I recommend sitting Andrew Luck if you can. I just think this sits up poorly. After what we saw last week, you have every permission in the world. Sit him, avoid him. No one will blame you. If they do, they can come yell at me. T.Y. Hilton's another guy I'd consider sitting because last week he didn't have a very good game, and he's going up against even a better defensive back. So, I don't know how that helps. And if he has a bad game, maybe Moncrief has a good game. If T.Y. Hilton's out for any, I think he showed up on the injury report. I don't think he practiced today. Then Dante Moncrief is sure to have a bad game, and that leaves Andre Johnson, who might end up being the good play. So, Keith, this is a mess. If you have any of these Colts players, I think this is a mess. It's a game to try and avoid most, if not all of them. Check out our rankings to sort of see what you can and cannot do. For the Broncos, I'm starting Peyton Manning this week. This Colts team gives up the 5th most passing yards at 280 yards per game. They're almost giving up 2 passing TDs per game. I like Emmanuel Sanders. I like Demaryius Thomas. Both must starts. Ronnie Hillman, we saw what he could do as an RB1. There is no reason why he can't have a great game here with the Colts giving up 124 yards rushing and 9 TDs on the season. C.J. Anderson, I think he's an RB3, and based on what we saw, but last week what we saw was a Broncos team dedicate themselves to running and scoring on the ground. If they don't keep that up, if they actually go to open up the offense, which I think they will this week, C.J. Anderson might be sort of left out of that. So be cautious with him. Let's see what happens in the Broncos defense. You start them even against Andrew Luck. If they could do what they did to Aaron Rodgers last week, think what they can do to Andrew Luck.
All right. The Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys.
Did I excite you? I was hoping for more than all right.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
There was nothing really, earth-shattering there. Indianapolis was bad enough that Pep Hamilton got fired. Last offseason, they were talking about him as a head coaching candidate.
All right, let's move on.
See?
You put it that way.
No, I'm just, right? They got a new offensive coordinator. It's not going to be very different because who changes a scheme now? You're not. What? Did you say whatever you say? It's supposed to be point counterpoint on this damn show. People. 3 and 4, 2 and 5. I don't even want to talk anymore. And your leading rusher. And we're having. I didn't hang up on it, folks. Yeah. Are you still there? It says I got a window saying we got an internet connection problem.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I thought you hung up on me.
I'm here. No.
Haven't reached that point of the night.
Yet. You'll have to do better than that.
Haven't reached that point of the night. I'm like, did he just hang up on me? You should have seen the look on my face. Anyway, the Eagles 3 and 4, Cowboys 2 and 5. When McFadden is your leading rusher and receiver, you have problems. Welcome to the Matt Castle era, Cowboys fans. Tony Romo, placed on injured reserve, is expected to return week 11. So you got to hold out a couple weeks more here, kids, but it's not going to be pretty. The Philadelphia Eagles are one of the bigger disappointing teams this year. I know 3 and 4 isn't all that bad. Still a lot of football left to play, but they are not scoring many points. Their defense is actually better than advertised, 11th in regards to points allowed. They do give up a bunch of yards, a little bend don't break on that offense. The offense, or defense rather, the Eagles' offense is nothing to jump and shout about. The Cowboys on defense, again, last year they played out of their shorts. They don't give up a whole lot of yards. They're in the lower half in scoring defense. This is a game where I really don't know who to pick because I don't think the Cowboys are very capable of scoring points, and I don't think the Eagles are very capable of scoring points. So I'm tempted to take the home team, but I don't believe in Matt Castle at all. So you know what? The hell with it. I'm picking the Eagles on the road.
This is a tough game to call, and it's tough for a couple reasons. The biggest one being the Eagles are coming out of their bye week, so they've had some extra time to prepare. But the Cowboys defensively, in the past 2 weeks with the return of Greg Hardy, their numbers are coming down. They weren't as good defensively. Now they're getting way better. And I like how this game matches up. I mean, last week, but for that touchdown, or was it 2 weeks ago, the Greg Hardy incident where he went ballistic?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. I mean, but for that kicking, I mean, they were in that game, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right. So, you know, Sam Bradford is not in any way, shape, or form making me feel confident that he can lead this team to the promised land. He's not making me feel confident that he can outpass or do anything to beat up on a Cowboys team that's given up, a little bit better than average, 234 yards passing, but 8 TDs on the season in 7 games. I mean, can he do better than that? Because he's going to have to, I think, to beat this Cowboys team, and I just don't know that he's got that. Then you've got the Cowboys' rush defense, which is getting better, 103 yards rushing, 7 TDs on the season. So that gets them to 14 points, a couple of field goals. But the Eagles, while they're as good defensively, if not slightly better, I mean, I think the Cowboys throw in a heavy dose of Darren McFadden, a heavy dose of Christine Michael, and with Dez Bryant getting another week under his belt, I think they're going to take some shots with the guys. So I'm going to take the Cowboys over the Eagles. Darren McFadden, it's a tough play for him, but he's still on the RB2 radar. Jason Witten gets a favorable matchup here. Hopefully he'll be able to get a score. Dez Bryant, he's a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, so look who you've got and make a call there. I mean, if you've got another guy that can get you 100 yards and 1 TD, I would consider avoiding Dez Bryant for another week. And then the Cowboys defense, I think they're a must-start against Sam Bradford. He's made enough mistakes and given up enough fantasy points alone that the Cowboys defense is a must-start. Sam Bradford, I'd avoid him. DeMarco Murray makes for a decent start. Ryan Matthews makes for a decent start, especially if they focus on running the ball, which I think they could do this week. Avoid Jordan Matthews. And you could also start the Eagles defense because, hey, it's Matt Castle after all. Cowboys win.
And that's got to be a selling point for Cowboys fans. It's Matt Castle after all.
I some other time we'll have to talk about it, but there was this posting on Google Plus about how people were feeling about Matt Castle coming to town, and I said my 2 cents, and it was the wrong 2 cents. So, but that was before he played. I'm sure people are warming up to what I said now.
The Monday night game, the Chicago Bears at the San Diego Chargers. 2 wins apiece for these teams, and oh gosh, this might be an ugly game, folks. The Bears fifth to last, 27th in points scored, 29th in points allowed. They're 22nd in passing yards per game, but 16th in rushing yards per game. Matt Forte not playing this week. Jeremy Langford in the backfield. Defensive passing yards per game, the Bears are actually 4th. Could you believe that? Because they seem to feel like they get shredded every week with a suspect secondary. But they give up a ton of yards on the ground. The San Diego Chargers don't really like to run the ball all that much. 29th in rushing yards per game, but they pass the crap out of it. 1st in passing yards per game. On defense, they're pretty good against the pass, but they can't stop a run game to save their lives, and they give up a lot of points as well. They are 27th in the league in points allowed, while being 14th in points scored. Being a home game, I don't really see any way where the Chargers lose this, and it's got nothing to do with the Bears' offense or anything like that. It's got everything to do with I don't think they can stop Phillip Rivers' passing game, because even for everything that is wrong with the Chargers, he's not it. Last week, a 3-point loss to the Ravens. Rivers still goes for 301 yards and 3 touchdowns. They need to figure out what's going on with the running aspect of their offense. Melvin Gordon has failed to impress. 18 rushes for 54 yards. He did lose a couple of fumbles 2 weeks ago that put him in the doghouse a little bit, but that offense is one dimensional, and you can't win in the NFL that way most nights. There's certain teams that can do it. The Patriots doesn't seem to bother them for obvious reasons. Not every team can do it, and the Chargers are at a point now where I think it's time to start talking about Mike McCoy's job, but I think they win this game. San Diego wins.
I'm going to call this a close game, and I'm still going to take the Chargers winning it, but I think that people are underestimating the Bears' defense only in the respect that they don't give up a lot of yards, and the Chargers' offense is really geared around that passing offense, generating a ton of yards, and so they might have some problems. That having been said, I'm starting Phillip Rivers. He's a top 5 fantasy quarterback this week against a Bears offense that gives up just over 200 yards passing, but a very healthy 16 TDs on the season. So that's a guaranteed 2. Then you have to start Steve, or do you say Keith? Stevie Johnson?
Stevie. He's always Stevie. He's always Stevie.
Oh, that's right. Out there he'll be Steve, but now for whatever reason people have been calling him Steve. I like calling him Stevie too. He's taking Keenan Allen's spot, so he should be a high-volume wide receiver, possession type of guy, while Malcolm Floyd is the guy that they're going to take shots to along with Antonio Gates. So you're starting that entire crew against this ragtag Bears secondary. I mean, like I said, they're doing a decent job on the yardage, but they just can't seem to stop anybody once the ball's thrown into the red zone. And then you start the Chargers defense because it's Jay Cutler. You never know, an interception here, an interception there, and they've got themselves a defensive score. For the Bears, Jay Cutler is a great streaming option this week. Chargers are giving up 238 yards per game, 14 TDs on the season. Jeremy Langford, a must start. Chargers, 124 yards per game, which is 6th most in the league. 8 rushing TDs on the season. That's 4th most in the league. So he is due for a big game. And if all goes as planned, there's going to be people talking about whether or not he's the next Matt Forte. That's for sure. Start Alshon Jeffrey because he's Alshon Jeffrey. He's going to get a bunch of volume, a bunch of passes, and probably a score. And Martellus Bennett is in the same boat. Hopefully he'll be a little bit more productive. I think he will because I think a majority of the yardage and the scoring opportunities do go to the tight end position. Keith, at the end of the day, you got to bolt up with the Chargers here. They're the better team than the Bears at the end.
All right, folks, there you have it. We didn't take a break. And you know what? We still filled 62 minutes worth of talk time.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, we were,
We're gas bags. That's what it comes down to.
We're gas bags. We're total gas bags. It's okay.
So that'll do it for this edition of the Fantasy Greek. Starts and sits in 60 minutes. For Jim Santias from thefantasygreek.com, I'm Keith Greek from 87sportsfans.com. I'm here every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Go head over to thefantasygreek.com. Get yourself signed up for the Skybox. Get the inside information updated as it comes. Make sure you can win your fantasy league, not just be in your fantasy league. Have a great week, everybody.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.